Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Daniel Rodriguez. He is the VP of Marketing at Seismic. Daniel, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited to chat with you today, Daniel. We're going to be talking about kind of your journey of growing your team from 1 to 20. And so there's been a lot that you've learned over the course of growing your marketing team. But before we dive into that, I'd love for our audience just to understand a little bit of context. Can you explain kind of what is Seismic? What are you guys all about over there?
Sure. Yeah. Again, and thanks for having me. This is exciting. I know you had Simon Sinek on recently, so I feel like there's a really high bar here that I need to make sure I live up to. So Seismic exists because marketing generally, and we're a software company, but marketing generally, I think has an unfulfilled promise to sales, which is to really help them drive revenue.
Yep.
And I think over the past 25 years, we've kind of lived within three phases. There was over 25 years ago, we were definitely in the Mad Men era as marketers, and that was really characterized as there being a lot of top of funnel activity with advertising, with PR agencies. It was mostly outsourced. You could really only measure it in eyeballs or impressions. And it was very unclear to sales probably how exactly marketing was really helping them in the trenches.
Yep.
About 10 years ago, right, we went into the lead gen era, and there was an explosion of new analytical capabilities for marketing, but there was also a very tangible way that marketing could say to sales, hey, we are actually helping you generate these things called leads.
Yep.
And then we're handing them over to you, and then best of luck. I mean, there are some things that we're going to do to help you, but we're really here to just, help facilitate giving you leads to work on. And now we're really today evolved into a major new era called the enablement era. And in that era, it's now marketing and sales working much more closely hand to hand, and marketing is making sure that sales has the right selling materials, they're in the right selling situations, and then putting them in the best position to win, and to win meaning to help them drive revenue. So I think we're now in this time and place where marketing is actually fulfilling its promise to sales, which is to help them drive revenue. And of course, Seismic is a software company that does help to facilitate getting salespeople the right selling materials that they need in order to win.
Got it. I love it. And so Daniel, as we were talking offline, you mentioned that one of the biggest things that you would want listeners to walk away with after hearing this journey from growing a team from yourself all the way up to the 20 folks that are on your marketing team now is this idea that you need to build your team in the order that people buy things. Can you unpack this idea for us?
Sure. Yeah. And I've been really fortunate to be a part of this journey at Seismic. So I joined Seismic just about 4 years ago, and at the time it was a pre-Series A company that had a little under $1 million of revenue, about a dozen customers, and about 10 people. And today, as we sit here, we're basically about 25x that in those metrics. So as we sit here today, we're over $25 million revenue company. We've got close to 300 employees. We've got over 200 customers.
Wow.
So this idea, and I don't think this idea in and of itself is particularly new, but it's probably something that folks get wrong, I think, with enough frequency that it's worth repeating. And it's something actually that when I'd sat down with Mike Volpe, who's formerly the CMO at HubSpot, he told me in my very early days while I was at Seismic, and he said, so if you look at the funnel as we think of the funnel, or if you think about mapping the buyer journey to that funnel, there's both ways of looking at it. In both of those ways, there's some type of linear progression from the early stage that somebody as a prospect is going through when they actually purchase, and then they continue along as a customer. And the idea is that if you are a more mature company and you have a large customer base, you would want to have functions within your marketing department that would be helping to support all of those stages along that journey. But if you're just starting out, or if it's early days in getting traction for your company, you want to overemphasize the effort that you're going to put into the very top of the funnel.
Yep.
And the idea is, if you think about the funnel as an actual physical funnel and poke a bunch of holes in the side and turn it into a sieve, there's really no way for you to know what areas you're getting leakage in your funnel if you don't first pour a ton of water into the top. And so really overemphasizing the top of funnel lead generation efforts in order to spur a bunch of information gathering and knowledge that you would then be able to use to tweak things and get better. And I'm a big fan of, I'm hoping this isn't like un-PC to mention another podcast for marketers or executives, but a big fan of what Dave Cancel's doing over at Drift with his podcast Seeking Wisdom.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about don't over-engineer some of the things that you want to make sure are done in a very thoughtful, non-using of technology way at the very beginning. Okay. So spend that time getting the stuff that you don't need to scale at the beginning. Get that stuff right. Spend your time on those things. And so that's really the way we've built that team, right? So at the beginning, we focused heavily on content-led strategy that would allow us to help generate leads for sales. At the beginning of when you join an organization, if you're somebody who's coming into a marketing role at a startup, people don't really know what you are going to do for them if you do not have a ton of leads and interest already pouring into the organization, except that you will help them make that happen. And if you're communicating something that is far afield from a direct line to revenue, then I believe you're going to struggle. So, I've heard the phrase, you're either in the early days, you're either building it, you're selling it, or you're getting in the way. And I don't know how to code. So you better believe that I was going to be messaging to people internally that, yes, I am here to help us sell. Yeah. And by that, I mean, I'm here to help us get new customers. And here are some of these new customers we're going to get. So we built the content marketing team. It started with me. I was creating the content. And then my first hire was somebody to help do content marketing. And then we expanded into other awareness related activities. So it was an outsourced PR function and design function that helped us. And then we brought those things in-house. And then the events related stuff. So the world that we sell into, a lot of our prospective buyers go to events. So that we then brought that help internal, which was great because I was doing that and I wasn't even very good at it, but I knew that was very important.
When you say events, you guys started putting on events or just started having a presence at existing events?
Yeah, mostly having presence at existing events. So actually having a booth and going and doing the trade show conference thing.
Got it.
And then once we started getting enough traction and getting enough leads, generating hundreds of leads per month, and then we started going out and building out the product marketing function, more of the mid-funnel function. Okay. And it's only been, and that was 2 years ago, and it's only been in the past year where we've then made investments into customer marketing. And we're going to continue to make additional investments into the customer marketing function because now we actually have enough customers where that makes sense.
Got it. And so why is it that you think that so many people try to jump ahead and build out infrastructure for something that they don't quite need yet?
I think there's two reasons for that. I think one is that a lot of people intuitively know what the roles are supposed to be. But the second one is just more pragmatic in that you might be somebody who came from a larger organization and just you had those roles, like the roles were there. And so one of the first things that you would think is, well, you can't do marketing if we don't have somebody doing product marketing, and then I would say, well, wait, is that really true? Do we truly need a person to be focusing on that? Because we still haven't even figured out some of the personas that we're really going after and seeing what that traction looks like. And so that there would then be activities kind of downstream that would make sense.
Got it. Okay. So Daniel, the second thing that I wanted to chat with you about during this interview is kind of how you're inspiring and managing the team. You've got an interesting take on this that I've heard other folks talk about before, but I'm really fascinated at how kind of you landed on this line of thinking. And it's really around kind of not focusing on someone's weaknesses, but instead kind of really hyper focusing on their strengths and doubling down on those. What does that look like kind of as the leader of the marketing organization? How does, with you leading it, what's that look like for you to actually tangibly do that day in and day out with the folks on your team?
Yeah, no, this is great. This is an area that I'm very passionate about. And I also feel like I'm seeing results from folks, both in terms of, I think, just employee morale, as well as people giving me that feedback that they do feel like they're actually improving. But I think the basic gist of it is that I think everybody, almost everybody, maybe if you're just at the very end, at the very end of your life, maybe this stops. But I think that almost everybody really, they want to get better. And we only really have a limited amount of our own time and resources kind of during each day to really focus on self-improvement. So we all want to do this, but we have to make sure that we're only focusing on the things that make sense. And I think that most people spend almost all of their self-improvement time on the wrong things. So most people, I believe, look at, and we're recording this here in February, so there's probably a bunch of people who are already beating the crap out of themselves for having failed at their New Year's resolutions in January. And I think a lot of people end up focusing things like their New Year's resolutions on areas of their weakness. And what they end up doing is saying, in order to be a better version of myself, what I really want to do is be a more complete version of myself. We have this ideal version of ourselves that we could say, if I could only just stop doing these other things, and I'd be more disciplined about the way that I could do them, then I would really be more closely aligned with how I think of that perfect version of myself. And I think it's a fool's errand to do this, because the reality is we have strengths and we have weaknesses that are inherent to us all. And our weaknesses will remain our weaknesses. And our strengths, by the way, will remain our strengths. So instead, if we actually want to get better in ways that we can both perceive and others will also perceive, and this is, of course, in a professional context, but also in your personal life, what we really need to do is understand our strengths and really focus on improving our strengths.
Have there been any tools, Daniel, that have helped you or helped your team kind of identify? Is it strengths finders? Are there other tools that you've been able to use to help people kind of figure out what those strengths are?
Yeah, so I do ask the folks on my team to take the Myers-Briggs personality test at 16personalities.com. And what I don't do, and I now have to caveat this because I've now talked to people about this in some blog posts and in other podcasts, and what I've actually, maybe this is a good thing. I've graduated to the point where I've got a troll. Somebody trolled me. I've got a hater out there, and they sent an article along that basically says that the personality tests are bunk and that you shouldn't be trying to manage to personality tests. And what I did not do is engage my troll. So I'm sorry, troll, if you're somehow listening to this and then you're going to start trolling me again on Twitter. But I did read the article. I actually read their trolling of me. And what I would have responded to them is I would have said, I am not just saying take this test and now that is who you are.
Yeah.
These tests are, and StrengthsFinder is another good example of this, but I think you have to pay for it. So we just used 16 personalities because it was free. But they're all getting around the same thing. And I kind of adhere to the 80-20 rule. These things are not going to be perfect. And what they do is they allow us to, between me and someone on my team, it allows us to just start to have a dialogue that's, an introspection from their end, but it doesn't seem like an inquisition for mine. So rather than them taking the test and then me saying, okay, now I know that these things are all you, I have them take the test and then I say, do you feel like this is you? And there's a write-up in there that talks about strengths and it talks about weaknesses. And we sit down and we look at each of those sections and I say, pick the ones out of these that you feel like are really you. and that are your best strengths and your best weaknesses. I'm not going to sit here and tell you who you are. And that's turned out to be incredibly instructive. People actually, it allows them to open up and talk about themselves in a way because they're kind of talking toward something else. I think that allows them to be very open and candid. And then I'm able to understand something about them without it feeling like I'm kind of coming at them or trying to use this against them. And then what we do is we say, okay, well, I'll write that down so that I can make sure on the strengths. We're going to really focus on turning those strengths into your superpowers. So let's understand what those are. And one of the trickiest things is that I won't always be able to know when you're really executing on one of your strengths because I can't really be there. I can't see some of the decisions you're making. But if you'd help me, then that will help me to be able to praise you. So if you recognize that you're catching yourself doing something you really feel like is a strength of yours, send it along to me and give me just a personal email and a hashtag humble brag. And that will allow me to either include that in something that I'd give you praise to the broader organization, or I can just be your fan. I can be your cheerleader and say you're doing this well. Now, the last piece of this is that we don't just ignore our weaknesses, because if you just ignore your weakness, the problem with weaknesses is that they're mostly little things that are recurring that then cascade into other things. So, for instance, a weakness of mine is defensiveness. Now, being defensive in and of itself wouldn't be as much of a problem if it weren't for the fact that I then get defensive about being defensive and it turns into a compounding error, right? And so what we do and what I counsel people to do is to be self-aware about our weaknesses. So when we go through that, we talk about what are a couple of weaknesses. And then the goal with weaknesses is not to turn them into strengths. We know that's a fool's errand. It'll never happen. But instead, we take a little pause. We have to make sure that we know what our weaknesses are so that when one comes along, we then are able to notice it and we can maybe even laugh about it. And then we can not take that next action that would have potentially gotten us into trouble, that would have damaged our brand within our own organization because I fired off that email that I then wish I could unsend, or if I said something to somebody that I love that I then wished I wouldn't have said. So those are the things that we're then trying to make sure we do. And again, those are also opportunities for somebody to send a quick little note and do a hashtag humble brag.
Yep. I love it. Daniel, this has been fantastic. If there's somebody listening and they want to stay connected with you, maybe they want to pick your brain further on this, or if they want to learn more about Seismic, what's the best way for them to go about doing both of those things?
Sure. My email is drodriguez@seismic.com, and you could feel free to email me there. And my Twitter handle is also @DLRDaniel, so you can reach me there as well.
Wonderful. And then is it just seismic.com?
Seismic.com. Yep, that's our website.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you again so much for your time today. This has been super helpful. So I know that our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of it. So I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it.
If you've been getting value from this podcast, you can help us reach more people by reviewing the show on iTunes. Here's how you can leave a review in less than a minute. Open your podcast app and tap the search icon in the bottom right corner. Type in B2B Growth, then select our show. Once you're there, tap the Reviews tab and tell us what you think of the show. These reviews help us out a ton.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.